Every founder has a product they believe in. Not every founder knows how to sell it. Wired to Scale is the show that closes that gap. Real conversations with the founders, operators, and revenue leaders who figured it out. Hosted by Zoya Segelbacher. Brought to you by Uncapped.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wired to Scale, the podcast where we sit down with founders and operators building the future, scaling businesses, and bringing unique products to market. I'm your host, Zoya Segelbacher, and today we have our guest, Zach Wright, the founder of Syft AI. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks so much for having me, Zoya.
Yeah, we're super excited to get into it. To kick things off, I would love to share with the audience what Syft AI is and hear a little bit about the origin story of what brought it to market.
Yeah, so Syft AI, we're an AI sales application. We essentially train our models on what you solve for, point at your ICP, and then give you prospects that have an active reason for you to engage via like a verified initiative that's relevant to what you solve. It's really opposed to kind of the spray and pray type prospecting efforts that people are used to. If I know who needs my product, prospecting is a lot different and you're a little bit more confident because you know you can help somebody, right? That's kind of the main gist of it.
Yeah. And like my understanding is you built this because you worked in sales for years prior to founding this company, and you had watched sellers spend hours doing research and what you thought, this should be able to take minutes. And if you could give every rep this level of context at scale, the whole game changes. At what point did you realize that this was something you could actually build?
Yeah, and I co-founded this with two other folks, one of which another ex-seller, and then we have a much more technical co-founder as well. But I really felt that sellers, the best way for them to hit their number, at least for me, I know there's a lot more like strategic sellers out there, but for me, it was like, I'm just going to throw so much luck plus effort at this and see how far can I go, right? And you were like turning over every single rock and you were trying to find those little golden nuggets per se, or like a reason to reach out to a given client. And that's back when like everyone was like, oh, it's a numbers game, or you just like dial for dollars or whatever, right? But you could imagine all of that time that I spent turning over rocks. If I knew already who was a good fit, I could reallocate that time to be a little bit more strategic, build a perspective on how I could help them in their business, and be a lot better salesperson overall. Even if I go and manually research, I'm never going to find everything that I need, right? There's always, everyone has that story of like, oh, I lost to this competitor, but I never even had a seat at the table, right? Like if I were there, we beat that competitor all the time. Well, I was like, both me and my co-founders were sick of this. So how could we co-found a company that could really help find those companies, and how could we be the best in the world at finding who needs your product right now? And that's kind of been the main approach there.
Yeah. Yeah. We're definitely in the time where signal-based is everything. There's a lot of noise. I think every company is trying to find a way to implement AI, implement Claude, all of those types of things. I want to hear your take on what the future of go-to-market looks like. But actually, before we even get into that, kind of like double tapping into Syft, how does Syft understand if a company is struggling with something versus, it just being like a potential fit, or how does it surface like real insights versus noise?
Yeah. And I think that last part that you mentioned is really important because you first said the word signals, and then how do you kind of separate that from the noise? Typically, a lot of legacy players in this space, they have done like they've created signals, which is essentially like, oh, someone is researching this topic at this company, but you don't know who, or someone hit your website, but you don't know who. And it's like, it's kind of leaving the seller with, okay, what do we do next here? Right. So what we've done is, instead of just signals, and sometimes signals has been served up as like this random score, as like okay, I got a 73 for this account. Now what? We tie it back to why we've read every single bit of the public intel on this company, their activity, their job posts, their news, earnings, 10K, earnings summaries, all of that, right? But we're tying it back to, and we explain back to the seller, why do you care about this account specifically? And then here's like a one button press to initiate perspective driven messaging that's quoting the sources and all of that. So I think just one thing I wanted to clarify is like signals are kind of cheap, to be honest. Like marketing loves signals because marketing, it's their goal to turn those into MQLs or marketing qualified leads. But from a sales perspective, it needs to go deeper. And it really needs to be like, why do I care about this account specifically? So we've done a really good job of uploading both from public, from the website of our customers, but then capturing the tribal knowledge of like what really makes a good prospect and uploading all of their sales playbooks and all of that. And then kind of speaking back to them in their language. Here's why you care about this account. Here's the evidence of where we found it. Because I feel like salespeople don't trust the data for the longest time because it's been like, oh, it's a 73. The account has a score of a 73. What is this? Right. So that's kind of, I don't know. We've taken a concept of like intent and signals and made it much more actionable.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point because intent signals have been around for a long time. I'm a seller. You were a seller. Like salespeople are very cautious to use those scores for tiering or to like truly buy into them. And so something that I think probably really helps with that credibility and helps with your accuracy is that you actually do like ingest all of the company data. What does that look like and how long does that take until an account can be like up and running?
Yeah, so we do all of our demos, our custom demos, because of how quickly we're able to spin up a profile for any given prospect. Technically, we can show something in about 2 minutes, which is crazy. And you can see that on our website. There's some simulations there of kind of what's going on. But we literally will take a demo and like someone will schedule a demo and it could be as soon as same day if we have just like the time to set it up before the call. But we'll ingest their website, get their product descriptions, use AI to extrapolate what signals are relevant to them, and then create value matches. So Syft is going and finding those value matches is what we call them, but it's essentially what are companies like in the last couple days showing active signals of reason to engage. It's like Workday is a big customer of ours, and they told us they were able to land $1 million TCV deal that they had previously lost the year before. They had written off the account, but then Syft saw that they were hiring a director of HR transformation, and it said, "Hey, we're actively picking a new HR vendor." The VP had told us, "Hey, we never would have known they were back in market, except when Syft told us." And then we already knew everybody, so it was very obvious. 10 days later, after that value match, they have a seat at the table, and they end up closing that deal, which was incredible. But it's all about how can we act on why now, not like things that have happened as snapshot way in the past, right? That's kind of the big difference.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. That's wild. Congrats to both of you, to you and your client. At Gong, we used to call this drinking our own champagne, meaning we would use the product that we were selling. I've heard that you're doing very interesting things when it comes to drinking your own champagne. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're actually handling your own go-to-market using Syft?
Yeah, it's so funny that you say champagne. That's what we call the project internally, is Project Champagne. But like if we're creating outbound sales technology, like we've got to have a very awesome outbound strategy ourselves. So what we do, we use Syft internally to get value matches each week. And what we do is, since we have a very easy way to spin up these profiles very quickly, we will implement for our value matches profiles for them without ever talking to them. And we'll start dripping them their own value matches over a 5-week span. And it will be like, hey, which of your rep covers this account? Because there is an active initiative going on right now that you guys can solve. You can just see how like we had to do our homework in order to deliver that value to them. We've done it in an automated way, which is awesome, but like we get responses back like, wow, this one isn't even on our radar. This is awesome. Let's take a meeting. So that has been a really, really exciting one for us.
Yeah, I love that. When you and I had spoken a couple of weeks ago, you were just about to launch a poll.
Yeah.
I'm curious, if you'd like to tell the audience what the poll was, and then what the results of that poll were.
Yeah. I think like just to summarize the poll, and we did get 64 responses. So we got something, right? We got a good enough sample size. But the poll was something along the lines of there's two very different ways of using AI. Are you using AI like a search engine like Google, or are you using AI and like agentic processes that are like kicking off one thing and a string of actions for you that are kind of taking actions on your behalf? And I guess the question was, there were 4 answers of what percentage do you feel comfortable as a seller handing off to AI? And it was under 10 to 40, 40 to 70, and more than 70. And an overwhelming majority, 58%, said that 10 to 40% range. So we're starting to see more and more people really embrace AI, but I feel like the way that the part of the puzzle that we're on is how can we automate as much of the mundane tasks that salespeople don't want to do, so then they can reallocate their time running deals, building perspectives, being different, learning their customers' business, versus like, I don't want my sellers being analysts or like researchers, right? Like I want that all served up of who should I be targeting and why now on their desk every Monday. And that really takes a lot off their plate.
Yeah. Was that number more or less than you were expecting?
That was probably more than I was expecting. I've seen a lot of people. I've actually been really impressed with how much people are diving into Claude and all sorts of LLMs out there to try to build processes, which is wild. Because like you think of people who are using LLMs just to like, I ask it a question and it gives me an answer, right? Like it's basically a glorified Google at that point. But like there are people out there that are truly trying to build something from end to end and automate a process. I would say there's just like a quick, I guess, educational thing is LLMs are like someone might ask an LLM, who should I be targeting and what should be the play that I run, right? So what you're doing when you're asking Claude that question is you're asking it to do 2 things. It's go retrieve the world's information and then help me reason on that information. The LLMs are extremely good at the reasoning part, that second part. What they're really bad at is the retrieval. What they do is a very shallow kind of retrieval of data until it finds something that's good enough. And then it articulates it to you so beautifully, it can kind of almost fool you at some points. But then it takes that and it takes action on that, and it reasons extremely well, probably better than any person you would know. It's that how can we feed the LLMs the smallest but most relevant, perfect answer so that it can spend all of its tokens on the reasoning aspect. I say that because if we don't have LLMs going and doing all the retrieval work and let Syft do that on what it is meant for, we can feed those answers downstream, and you'll find yourself getting a lot better results when it's kind of given that perfect data set, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's funny how where the technology gets more advanced, like the stories that we tell, like as time goes on, it's more fancy. But at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to like fundamentally, if you don't put good data in, you're not going to get insights, right? Like you're not going to get the right kind of insights. And yeah, that is kind of scary because in a world without AI, you put bad data in, you have a person who, like you said, maybe isn't as skilled at just connecting the dots in any way that makes the most compelling argument. But yeah, now you can have AI sound really, really confident
Yeah.
about just complete possible, right? If you put trash in, you get trash out, complete trash, possibly.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is really
Like
funny.
I know a real world example. I know someone who was looking for a job recently, and they were like, "Hey, I want somewhere with really great benefits, and this is the type of job I'm looking for. It's in Austin, Texas." And the LLM came back with, "Oh, what about Dell and what about Apple?" Like just because it was a reversion to the mean, so there were the most job posts from there, and like it just looked for good benefits, but it completely ignored like 5 other characteristics. And that person was like, "No, I'm actually looking for a company like this." And then lo and behold, that company was actually had a perfect job post, but that wasn't one of the results at first, right? So it was like, I think these LLMs, what they are really bad at is like, I'm just going to go grab something that's good enough, but then is really good at articulating it. We need to like really shrink the context window of like none of the junk and just the answer.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's a distraction. You're back to the noise.
Yeah, exactly.
So staying on this thread, we know every company is racing to adopt Claude. You kind of alluded to it. A lot of companies are seeing if they can build certain solutions end to end. Where do you think GDM is headed in the future? And what does it mean if everyone's racing to build on Claude and other technologies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because what Claude is kind of doing what Clay was set out to do, which is it's connecting to everything and orchestrating really beautifully. So what's nice about Claude and where something like a Syft fits in is how can I collect all of my information, both from the third party, I'm going to call it signals, but like third party data providers, as well as our own first party data behind closed walls, like the Gong transcripts and your CRM opportunities and all of that, and then take that and orchestrate downstream actions. So if for Syft, I think what we have to bet on is like, okay, well, like the messaging and picking a good contact, that's all going to be table stakes with how good these LLMs are. How can we feed your Claude instances? Here are the companies that you should be targeting now with the evidence and the raw text, so then and only pass across that smallest amount of data so that it can take really educated actions downstream. At this point, what's nice about that is like we don't have to integrate to everybody's tools. We don't have to worry about it's a one-way push of data into their system so they can take it and marry it with their internal data. So I think it creates quite an easy experience. Now, the hard part is for a lot of these prospects, they're trying to build with Claude, and they build something because it's cool, and Claude gets them very quickly 80% of the way there, and everything like looks right on the surface, but like everyone knows the devil's in the details. Like that last 20% is where all the gotchas happen. So I think that's where some of the like they're gonna have to work out the kinks a little bit on like, okay, well, what are the like Claude will start getting smarter at guessing the next actions versus having the orchestrator, like the go-to-market architect, like kind of building this and have to know all the workflows and all of that. So I don't know. It's a very exciting use case for sure. I think there's still some room to grow, but I don't know. We want to focus on that front part of it, which is like, who should I target now and why? And then just feed that downstream to make the actions even smarter.
We see a lot of people building in Claude. They're trying to build end-to-end products of all different types. But for people who are trying to build a product like Syft in-house, where do you see the future of that going? And how do you see Syft fitting in long term?
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, and it's a really popular topic. There's two kind of different directions. One is just a seller specifically that is like, oh, I'm going to start tinkering with Claude and kind of try to do this myself as an individual seller. Then there's kind of much more mature AI go-to-market organizations who are really stringing together and orchestrating different processes. Either way, there's a problem that comes up, right? Like, long story short, they're asking an LLM to do a lot in one prompt or in a couple of prompts and processes. They're asking it to retrieve and then reason. And what I mean by that is they might say, hey, what are my top accounts to sell to? What it's going to do is it's going to go and retrieve a very like shallow look at here's one chunk of information. And then it's going to go downstream and reason on that. It's really good at the first thing, the retrieval, really bad at retrieval, and then really good at reasoning. What Syft is doing instead is we are actually reading the entire world's third-party data, and then only passing through to the LLMs the things that are most important. And it's actually like the less you pass through, the better. We would pass through the smallest but cleanest amount of information of who should I be targeting, why are we a fit, and the evidence of that. The hard part is when you ask an LLM to retrieve, it's going to find something that's good enough and then word that in a very articulate manner. But you're really missing out on the most important answer, because LLMs in general, it's really a mean of, like, it's an average of information, right? So if I am just retrieving good enough and then I reason on it, it's going to sound very good, but over time it's going to break down. So if we can feed it that really clear, targeted answer, it's going to make it go much better. So we feel like in the future, if we can be the best at who should you be targeting and why are you a good fit, that's going to be a really good niche where we can fit in with these LLMs and really make their outcomes better. Because it's going to look good, but like, how can we make this stand the course of time of like, this is a valuable direction? Yeah. So that's kind of been how we're fitting in.
That makes so much sense, because if you think about it, if you're like whoever your prospect is, whatever persona they are, let's say they're a CRO or CEO, they know what their real triggers are. They know what their real compelling events are. So it doesn't really matter how good you prompt an LLM to make an argument that's irrelevant. You're not going to convince the person whose primary job it is to know and decide these things that they're missing out. So that makes a lot of sense. I can kind of think to myself messaging that I've seen where it's just like this random thought that's like connected back to something that is true. Like you could argue that like in onboarding, the rep was taught that this is a signal, but it's not like the most important signal, or it's not really related to like decisions that are being made. Yeah. Just because you latch onto that and you make an argument that's really well worded, if anything, you could possibly lose credibility with your audience. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've seen that all the time. We just had a prospect who, she was really proud of the processes that she built in Claude, and it was great because it was bringing in her first-party data from CRM, from Gong, from all these different areas. But then when it came to, for each of her reps as an SDR leader, she was serving a prioritized list of accounts each week, basically rebuilding what Syft does. But then we were like, all right, well, that's the number one account that you're saying this week. Let's peel it back. Like, what drove that decision? And it was actually, the evidence was 14 months old. And it's like, all right, well, that's the exact problem that we solve. And it was so hard, it was so difficult because it had a very compelling reason and it articulated it really strong. But it was very dated. Like, did they probably already choose a vendor and start the implementation? Probably. Right. So like, that's like the devil's in the details, and we need to like the first 80% looks cool, but we got to ask ourselves, how do we make this valuable? And that's the big difference.
Yeah. And what you're doing, you've talked about changing the way that reps are approaching their accounts. You've talked about moving away from leading with a pitch to instead leading with perspective. What does that actually look like in practice for the reps once they have access to the Syft data?
Yeah, it's quite a bit of culture change, because you have to change someone's mind from, I'm going to email, I have to email 500 people this week because it's all about the numbers, right? Instead, what if we had a subset of that, maybe 15% of that, but all 15% have its own verified initiative that you know about? Okay, now you hit a button and it's like, hey, I saw this, and quote the source that comes with this challenge. Here's how we solve it. Here's how we've solved it with X customer of ours and the impact that they found, right? Like if you plug that into a spam detector, or like, is this AI slop? It's going to tell you it's 100% human written, right? Because it's undeniably one-to-one. I'm quoting your job post or your earnings, extrapolating a problem, how we solved it specifically with someone in your industry. So it's just like, that type of engagement sounds so different than everybody else out there who is saying the exact same thing. Hey, congrats on your Series B, pitch my product. And like the end user and the recipient of this prospecting message, they're seeing, if everyone's writing with AI and like it has no context, it just looks so sloppy and it's all looking the same. So it's so funny. Like if you build a perspective and you actually are thinking about how you can help that prospect, you sound like it's a breath of fresh air for your prospect. They're like, oh my God, thank God this person did their homework. Because I've seen congrats on our Series B 18 times in the last 2 days. Or like, hey, I saw you went to Ohio State, go Buckeyes. It's like, no one cares. Even if you also went to Ohio State, the recipient doesn't care. Like, it's just so fake. So I think we focus on the activity of the company and try to diagnose problems that are likely associated with those observations.
Yeah, you can definitely tell when something's written by AI. I think I read a stat that was like a little over 50% of readers, prospects can tell within the first sentence.
Yeah.
If it's AI or not at this point.
That's
People
so funny. Some people
good.
are like misspelling on purpose just to like show that they wrote it. Or like sending like a screenshot of like their like the company's website in the background, or like something that's like undeniably
them in the office.
Yeah, like undeniably one-to-one. But yeah, it's getting really bad. So what's good is if you're doing the right things, you stick out in a positive way, and if you're kind of blending in with the crowd, that's how your prospect is going to perceive it as well.
Yeah. I would love to talk about demo day that you went to. You went to a demo day hosted by Brendan Short, the creator of the Signal newsletter. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like? It sounded very unique.
Well, it was very easy for me. I didn't have to do anything. But it was very interesting, very awesome format. His whole goal was, how can he get some spotlight on some sales tech that's doing some really interesting stuff. But the caveat of the demo day was no one at the company could do the demo. Your own customers have to demo for you. So that was really unique. I was like, oh my gosh, who would possibly, like, there were a couple hundred people there. So like, go and ask one of your customers, hey, you want a demo to a couple hundred people at once? And then a recording will go out to thousands of people, and they're like, yeah, no problem. Well, I was racking my brain, who should be this person? I went to the analytics, who is the most active user in Syft? And it was this individual, Brian Generich at Clearblade, one of our customers. And he did an incredible job. The hardest part is the demo could only last 3 minutes. So like, try to get across something in 3 minutes valuably. Like, That's super difficult, especially if it's not your product. So everyone, like a lot of other vendors, not to bash them, but they kind of gave slides to their customers to present. I did not do that. I told him use Syft and prospect in Syft and tell a story throughout. And he said, hey, here's a company that I've never heard of. It has a verified project that my company can solve for. Let's prospect to them. And then he hit send, and it actually sended on the call, which was cool. And then he attributed 4 out of his 8 opportunities that quarter for him were found in Syft, and he never knew about the accounts before. So that was really awesome. We ended up getting like 16 inbounds that day. And this was only like 2.5 weeks ago. We ended up already closing 1 deal after like a 2-call close. So it was really exciting. Those kind of demo days, I feel like, are so authentic, and they're so, I don't know, they're so different. It's nice.
Yeah. Good on Brian.
Yeah. I sent him one of these Syft Yetis that's personalized. So maybe I owe him another like Syft swag or something, you know? That's awesome. What a great favor.
Yeah. That is very cool. Talk about, like social proof, having one of your own customers demo it, do it live.
Yeah.
On the spot.
Yeah. Real gutsy.
It's awesome. Here's kind of a fun question. If you think back to when you were selling, what's one deal where you would have loved to have had the Syft insights, where you think back and you're like, oh, if only I had known that they were going through XYZ, because now through, I don't know, some kind of public announcement, or just you've been in the game long enough to understand, that would have been like a great account. Do you have any accounts that come to mind, or any fun stories where you can think back and just really kick yourself for not creating this earlier?
Yeah, I won't say the name of the company specifically, but like just in general, when you hear about, hey, like someone in your ecosystem, like, hey, we just closed like a $4 million deal with this company. Have you ever heard of them? It's like, oh, I have heard of them, but I like completely didn't put, like, sellers do like tier A, tier B, tier C, and that like massively spending company is like buried in your tier C accounts. I feel like every seller has had that type of story. So that's the hard part, is like a lot of sellers will prioritize an account because it looks like a customer, or like from a sizing perspective, or like it's a sexy logo like Nike. So like I want to be selling to Nike. But what about this unsexy logo over here that's growing steadily? But they're trying to solve exactly what you sell. But like, because you just neglected them, they went and bought your competitor. They came, they evaluated, and they bought, and you never even reached out to them. I feel like every seller has had that moment, So it's like, that was really what inspired Syft in general, is like, I don't want a snapshot in time once a year of RevOps sending me my tier A, tier B, tier C accounts. I feel like the prioritization of like, who should I be targeting is such an important decision, but people really make that an afterthought and just start dialing for dollars, right? But they're like, they didn't take a second to like sharpen the axe, So the way we approach it is we're surfacing new intel and new priorities every week, because things change, right? And we actually have a way to kind of move on the fly with those changes. And that's been really exciting for a lot of our customers. We're not just looking at like the customers, but we're recommending prospects that you don't know about. I love demoing to prospects, and it's like, I've heard like a CEO screenshot as we're demoing. It's like, oh, why'd you screenshot that? And they're like, oh, well, it's not even in our CRM. And it's like, that's the exact reason why you need Syft.
Yeah, I love that example so much, because tiering is really challenging. And I actually think with so much automation, I think companies are really leaning into the automated tiering, because you can pump in so much information, you can use Clay, you can use all these things, you can score them. And then, it's a number that you get from RevOps at the start of the quarter. And And if you're not going through and looking at, new information, if you're not using, a technology that's doing what you can do, it is a pretty static list. How often, like, let's say, it sounds like with Syft, you're able to get these insights on a daily basis, but pre-Syft, or if a company, hasn't made this investment yet, I'm just curious your take on this. How often should an AE be tiering and re-tiering their account manually?
Well, that's the tough part, is you think about how much time am I spending doing that exercise versus actually selling, right? So without a Syft, you've got to be doing that almost on a monthly basis, creating a plan and executing on that plan, right? So Syft, what we're doing, we're scraping all of these accounts, doing all the hard research for you. And then we run our processes on Sunday. So when you log in on Monday, you're getting new intel that's 7 days old. Those might be different accounts that like completely different priorities than the previous week, right? So what's tough, like if someone's doing this manually, I remember doing it quarterly back in, like, I'm talking 2018. And like you would create a plan for the quarter and then you'd go execute on that plan. The hard part is, and like everyone has had this situation where your boss comes to you, or worse, your VP comes to you and is like, hey, did you see your account did this? And you're like, no, I didn't know that. If you've ever had that foot in your mouth moment, you know that it's just impossible to keep, especially if you have like 500 or 1,000 accounts. How the hell are you going to know everything at everywhere, right? So instead, Syft, what we're doing is telling the rep everything they need to know on their territory. And then maybe the accounts that they need to be targeting but aren't even on the radar, like not tier A, B, C, or D. It's like tier unknown. You're certainly not going to engage those accounts. So that's kind of been how we approach it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. At Vanta, we call those random ones Beef Co., like some random beef company out there.
Oh, that's good.
Could need Vanta.
Yeah.
So we call them the Beef Co. Accounts. But yeah, it's always a balance, right, between those like revenue generating activities and the like admin work, for less of a better word. But yeah, I love it that you're getting sellers back to those revenue generating activities and getting them what they need. For early stage founders who are listening to this, they're probably thinking about whether they have enough, I don't want to use the word signal, but whether they qualify for Syft to have them show up on your own project campaign. What does a company need, or like where does a company need to be at before it would make sense for them to use Syft?
Yeah, we've worked with companies of all sizes, like even founder-led selling, where it's like the founder is the salesperson. In that scenario, like they don't have the luxury of throwing hundreds of bodies at the problem. So they need to be, only when they're limited amount of prospecting, like they need to know exactly who and why and when. But we're also working with large, I wouldn't say like enterprises, but we've been working with like that mid-market space where they're really embracing AI, but they're wanting to get a little bit sharper on their processes. That's been a big fit for us. So like maybe if someone's like hiring their first go-to-market AI person, that might be a signal that Syft picks up that says, hey, we need to go and reach out to these folks, right? So it just from a B2B sales perspective, we're targeting a lot of different areas. The hardest part is if you're trying to compete with someone like an Amazon or a Microsoft, if you try to run the same playbook as an Amazon or Microsoft, they're going to beat you, right? So you have to think differently and think outside the box and use AI in clever ways. And that's where we kind of fit in.
I love that. I feel like that is a really great way to end. If you want to beat the big players, you've got to think differently. And I just love hearing how founders are thinking about their go-to-market in different and creative ways. It's been really awesome hearing how you've used your own champagne, you're drinking your own champagne, you're doing some really creative outreach and go-to-market motions, and you're changing the way that your customers are doing it. So thank you so much for your time today, Zach.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And if anybody wants to find you, reach out, what's the best way that they can learn more about Syft?
Yeah, Syft AI, Syft with a Y. SyftAI.com is our website. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active. LinkedIn/Zach Wright Syft. Same with my Twitter, Zach Wright Syft. So happy to connect with anybody for sure.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Zach.